What needs to happen for Texas to win the national championship this season? The folks at ESPN gave 3 answers to that question. Are they right? We'll debate on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Intro.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are locked on to the Texas Longhorns. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner, Texas grad, Austin local, and longtime sports radio host here in the Lone Star State. Thank you for making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and remember to leave a comment. That's one of the fastest ways to help us grow right here on Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We will continue our fall camp preview and run down the latest headlines from the world of Longhorn recruiting a little bit later in today's episode. But first, ESPN's Bill Connolly released his annual college football ifs list, where he takes a look at the top contenders and tries to figure out how each of these teams can come together. To put it simply, he's basically saying if these things happen, this team can win it all. For Texas, Bill Connolly has 3 ifs. Perhaps it's important to note this is the 8th year that he's posted this article. 6 of the previous 7 national champions have had 3 ifs or fewer. Good news for Texas. If this sounds like a foreign language to you, let's dive in. Here are the 3 ifs for the 2025 Texas Longhorns, according to ESPN. The first if: Texas can win the national championship if Arch is what we think he is. This one feels pretty obvious, no? Here's the description from the folks at ESPN. Quote, the betting odds from ESPN Bet have Texas as the national title co-favorite with Ohio State, and starting quarterback Arch Manning is the favorite for the Heisman Trophy, listed ahead of 3 quarterbacks, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, and Drew Aller, who threw for a combined 11,018 yards last season. Manning threw for just 969. Nice. He has started 2 career games, and they were against ULM and Mississippi State, teams that combined for a 7-17 record. We've caught glimpses of everything we were supposed to see from the number 1 quarterback in the 2023 recruiting class, but we haven't seen him do it in any sort of sustained fashion. If Manning is indeed the best player in the country for 2025, and the puzzle pieces all start to fit together for Steve Sarkisian's Longhorns. But what if he's merely a very good but inconsistent first-year starter? End quote. It's a fair question. Now, if Arch Manning is the best player in the country this year, Texas is winning it all. There's no if about that. If Arch Manning is the best player in college football, Texas is going to win the 2025 national championship. That's a big if, because there's some really good players in the country. I don't think Arch Manning has to be the best player in college football. Hell, nobody would confuse Will Howard with the best player in the sport last year, or J.J. McCarthy as the best player 2 years ago. Those guys were really good, but they weren't best in the sport good. You don't need that. You don't need that. If you have what Will Howard was last year, if you have what J.J. McCarthy was 2 years ago, you're good. Those 2 teams have proven you can win it all without having the Heisman winner, the Davey O'Brien Award winner at quarterback. So Bill asks, what if he's very good but an inconsistent first-year starter? Again, if he's very good, the Horns have a chance. Inconsistent is really vague. Like, I would argue that Quinn Ewers was both very good and inconsistent last year, and the Horns were a couple of plays away from playing for a national championship, and I think all of us agree that Texas gets past Ohio State, they would have gotten by Notre Dame and won the whole thing. So if Arch is just that, a very good quarterback who's inconsistent, the Horns have a shot because they were right there a year ago. If Arch is better than what Quinn was last year, which I think we all hope that he is, then the Horns' chances of winning the whole thing obviously go up. So that's my 2 cents. This is obvious. If the quarterback is as good as advertised and as good as people are hyping him up to be, then yeah, Texas can win a title. If he's not, there are layers to it. Obviously, if he's bad, then Texas isn't winning, but you don't have to be the best player in America to give your team a shot to hoist the trophy when the year is all said and done. The second if: Texas wins the national championship if the young receivers give Arch what he needs. Here's the ESPN description. Quote, in 2024, 9 receivers and tight ends caught at least 5 passes for Texas, only 2 returned. Slot man DeAndre Moore Jr., who had 2 100-yard games and some serious drop issues, and blue chip sophomore Ryan Wingo, who looked fantastic early in the season, but caught just 10 balls in the final 8 games. As with Manning, if they're ready to raise their game, then combined with incoming receiver Emmett Mosley V, tight end Jack Injuries, and the latest round of blue chippers, the receiving core could be outstanding, but it's not a given until we see it. End quote. This is fair. I mean, we did a deep dive preview of the receiver and tight end rooms going into fall camp on yesterday's show, so we won't go all in on this topic here. Check out yesterday's show if you missed it. But yeah, Texas needs its receivers and pass catchers to be really good. They need Ryan Wingo to up his game in year 2. They need DeAndre Moore to stay healthy, fix some of those drop issues, and be a go-to target for Arch Manning in his 3rd year on the 40 acres. Emmett Mosley, the transfer from Stanford, put up really good numbers with worse quarterback play and lesser talent around him last year. The Horns need him to be good. And then you throw in Jack Injuries at tight end. I think he is going to be really good, but obviously Texas needs him to be close to what Gunnar Helm was a season ago. Losing Matthew Golden stings. He was awesome. He was a first-round pick for a reason. Red zone threat, led Texas in touchdowns last year. Incredibly clutch, 4th and 13. Just was always there when you needed him. You need to have a guy like that. Gunnar Helm set records at tight ends last year. You need to have a guy like that. Those guys were huge parts of last year's success. They're going to be missed. You can't go from having them to having a bunch of jabronis on the outside. You're not going to win a national championship that way. Look at Georgia. Georgia won the SEC last year. They made the playoff. So you can do that if your receivers aren't great, but that's what cost Georgia numerous times last year, and it was a part of why they lost their first game in the CFP a season ago. You got to have good talent at the skill positions. Texas went out. They brought in an impact receiver. They brought in an impact tight end. And again, 4 blue chippers, 4 top 100 recruits in America coming in at wide receiver. Down the line, I think those guys will be great. The question is, are they ready to be great right away? That is an understandable if for Texas. And then lastly, the third if, according to ESPN, Texas wins the national championship if the rebuilt lines hold up. Talking about the lines of scrimmage, of course. The description, quote, sketchy line play can trip up even the flashiest of contenders. And like Ohio State, Texas is replacing a lot in the trenches. Right guard DJ Campbell is the only returning starter on an O-line that lost All-American left tackle Kelvin Banks. And on defense, 5 of last season's top 6 in terms of snaps are gone. Returning end Ethan Burke is outstanding, and linebackers Trey Moore and Colin Simmons will assure the Horns can rush the passer. But Sarkisian was concerned enough to bring in 5 defensive tackle transfers. They have the requisite size, but they have a very high bar to clear. End quote. Look, I'm a broken record when it comes to this. You can't win if you can't win in the trenches. Simple as that. Texas needs to have good play on the offensive and defensive lines for them to at least get back to where they were last year, but obviously to get over that semifinal hump and find a way to bring the first national championship back to Austin since 2005. Now, I will say this. As good as the Longhorns offensive line was last year, they got punked in their 3 losses against Georgia and Ohio State. They want to win a national championship. There are parts of that group that need to be better this year. And it's going to be tough. You're replacing 4 starters on the offensive line. We're going to dive into this topic a little bit more in our next segment, but that's the reality of the situation. The defensive line, I feel really good about. I think Texas has the best edge room in America. You heard some of those names from Bill Connolly there. A little surprised Ethan Burke got the first mention, but Ethan's a good dude. I've interviewed him a number of times. Big fan of him as a person, big fan of his game. I'm expecting big things from him this year. But you got Colin Simmons. You've got Trey Moore. Those guys are studs. Colton Vasek, hopefully 100%. Dealt with a couple of different injuries last season. You've got some great edge rushers. And then, 5 defensive line transfers, that's not a bad thing. I don't know why Bill Connolly's like, oh, that's a concern that Texas brought in 5 D-line transfers. No, they want to make sure that they are really good at that spot. So they went out and got 5 guys with legit Power 4 experience. I mean, the Horns lost 7 scholarship defensive linemen from a year ago. So Sark just needed bodies, but he didn't go out and get a bunch of G5 guys, or he isn't relying on a bunch of incoming freshmen to fill the void that Guys like Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton and Bill Norton and Tia Savea are leaving. He added impact defensive linemen. That's a good thing. It's the beauty of the transfer portal. You can reload instead of rebuild. So, yeah, I agree. It is a high bar to clear for the Texas D-line to be at the level it's been in each of the last 2 seasons. But I think that group will be solid. Less concerned about the defensive line than I am the offensive line. And again, we're going to dive into that as we continue our room-by-room preview and discuss the biggest storylines going into fall camp, which is now just 6 days away. I want to hear from y'all. Do you agree with Bill Connolly? What are your biggest ifs for Texas football in 2025? Again, for Bill at ESPN, Arch Manning, wide receivers, lines of scrimmage. All fair questions, all things that Texas needs to have working for them if they want to win it all this year. But I like what Texas has in those 3 spots. I think the Longhorns have a very good shot to win the whole thing. But I want to hear from you, your biggest ifs for the Longhorns in 2025. All right, I just mentioned it. 6 days away from the start of fall camp. We're going to continue our position room preview and talk about the big uglies next right here on Locked On Longhorns. But first, a word for our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, high-stakes soccer, or golf on the green, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make the games a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are at the pool, at the lake, on vacation. You could be making a lot of money with the daily contests that they have on FanDuel. New contests and competitions every single day. It's so easy to track all of your matchups. They pay out very quickly, and they turn any game into a must-watch event. If you're new to FanDuel, they're hooking you up. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. It's that simple. FanDuel.com, open the FanDuel app, create an account. You place a $5 bet. If that wins, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets just like that. So open the FanDuel app today or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, back here on Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. Texas fall camp begins on July 30th, 6 days from now. Each day leading up to the 30th, we're taking a deep dive look at a different position room on the Texas roster. On Monday, we talked about the quarterbacks. Tuesday, running backs. Yesterday, it was receivers and tight ends. Be sure to check out those shows if you missed them. But today, we're talking about the offensive line, and I will say it right off the bat. This is my biggest question mark on this side of the football. Hell, honestly, it's my biggest question mark on the entire team going into 2025. Of course, 4 starters are gone from last year, and those guys weren't just any starters. You lose a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, the guy who won the Outland Trophy and the Lombardi Trophy last season. You lose your starting center, who started more games than any center in school history. You lose a 6'6", 330-pound behemoth at right tackle who was drafted by the defending Super Bowl champs. And you lose a super versatile swing piece in Hayden Connor as well. Those guys will be missed. And last year's offensive line was one of 3 finalists for the Joe Moore Award, which is given out to the best O-line in the country. I honestly don't think Texas was a top 3 offensive line in America, but they were still really good. Whether I agree with them being a Joe Moore Award finalist or not, conversation for a different day. They were still very good, and those guys won't be easy to replace. So 80% of that group is gone. What does this group look like? My biggest questions going into camp are Neto and Brandon Baker ready? DJ Campbell is back. He's your lone returning starter. He was just named first team all preseason SEC last week. So big things expected of him, and we've seen big things from him. Trevor Gooseby, your starter at left tackle. We saw enough from him late last season to know what he's about. Cole Hudson taking over at center. He's played and started a bunch of games during his Longhorn career, so we know him too. But the redshirt junior, Neto Umeozulu at left guard, and then the true sophomore, Brandon Baker at right tackle. Those are the guys that we really don't know anything about. I mean, we know what they were in high school. We've got practice reports. We've seen them play in games, but are they ready for the big time? And, of course, they will be tested right away 37 days from now when the Horns open up the year at the Shoe. Neto's going into year 4, so he knows the offense. His body is developed. He can drink now. He's played in games in his Texas career, 13 of them to be exact. but he hasn't started any games. All of his appearances have been in mop-up duty. So is he good enough for the SEC? Is he good enough for week 1 against Ohio State? Even though the Buckeyes lost a ton from their D-line, they're the Buckeyes. They're going to have a ton more on the D-line this year. It'll prove to be a tough test. And then Brandon Baker, the 5-star coming out of high school, one of the crown jewels of the Horns 2024 class. He's supposed to be great. Heard good things about him in the spring. Sounds like he's progressing. Steve Sarkisian, some interview he did a month or two ago, was speaking pretty highly about the development of Brandon Baker. But same question for him as it is for Neto. Is he ready to be great? That's the first question. Those two guys, it's fair to ask questions about Trevor Gooseby for a full year and Cole Hudson for a full year as well. But again, I think I know what we've got with them. I don't think I know what we've got with the other two. The other big question for the Longhorn O-line is the depth good enough? Texas was very fortunate with offensive line help in 2024. I should say for most of 2024. Down the stretch, that fortune kind of ran out. But I think Texas was one of like 6 or 7 teams in the country that started the same offensive line in all 12 regular season games. Of course, Banks got hurt in game 12, the A&M game. He missed the Georgia SEC title game. But again, for the most part, you only needed your starting 5 last season. Can that happen again this year? Big if. Hard to stay that healthy up front. If it can't happen and Texas does get hit with the injury bug, what do you have? I mean, a true freshman may be your backup at left tackle. Nick Brooks, great spring on the field, 6'7", 349 pounds. He's a monster of a human being, and sounds like he hit the ground running in spring ball, but we're talking about a true freshman here. A little scary. Your left tackle protecting Arch Manning's blind side, your backup, I should say, is a true freshman. And then you got Connor Stroh, Nate Kibble, Daniel Cruz, Jaden Chapman, Andre Kojo, Connor Robertson. They could be great. Most of those guys are blue chip guys, and most of them have played. Connor Robertson especially has appeared in a number of Longhorn games in his career. But let's be real. Like we just don't know what those guys are against good competition when they're not in mop-up duty. I trust in Kyle Flood. I don't think he's a question at all. I think he's one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He's been great for Texas. I am incredibly happy that he is still here because that's a guy who's been a head coach before and an offensive coordinator / play caller before. And he stuck around at Texas and he's done a tremendous job recruiting and developing Texas on the offensive line. But for the last couple of seasons, it's been pretty much the same group. This year, it's a different group. So he's got to get that figured out. But again, I'm a believer in Kyle Flood. I don't think this offensive line is going to take some massive step back. And I really do believe there's a chance that group can be better in 2025. I know that might sound outlandish considering what you're losing, but there were times last year where I wasn't real thrilled with the Texas offensive line play. Like, here's what I do know. I don't know everything about that group. I do know that Texas needs its offensive line to be better against elite competition. First segment, we talked about like what has to happen for Texas to win it all. Well, Texas's offensive line kind of got punked against Georgia and Ohio State last year. Don't believe me? How about these numbers? Texas's rushing stats in those 3 games. First game against Georgia, 27 carries, 29 rushing yards. SEC title against Georgia, 28 carries, 31 rushing yards. The playoff semifinal loss to Ohio State, 29 carries, 58 yards. That's 2 yards a carry. That's the best of those 3 games. The Horns averaged 1.1 yards a clip against Georgia and Ohio State. Those teams are great, littered with NFL talent. But those are the teams you're going to have to beat to win the whole thing. I mean, Texas dominated the bad teams. They dominated the average teams. They dominated Clemson. Clemson made the playoff last year. They were above average. Texas ran all over that group, and mainly because the offensive line was as good as they were. But again, against the teams that you have to beat to win the SEC championship and to win a national championship, they weren't good enough. So, final question with the offensive line, and I guess this is more of a regular season question than a training camp one. Can this group, despite losing 4 starters, be better against elite competition? It's a big ask, but hopefully it can happen. We'll see. So there's your offensive line preview going into fall camp. Again, what do you have with Neto? What do you have with Brandon Baker? How's the depth looking? If you do need to go to the second team guys, can you rely on them? Or does just the offensive line fall apart with some sort of injury? Again, I trust in Kyle Flood. A lot of those guys have been there for multiple years. They've got the chemistry. They've got the cohesion. I trust the development. I think Texas will be fine, but it is a question. Maybe that's telling of how good I feel about the other spots on this team, that I'm trying to talk myself into this group being better than last year, and it's still my biggest question. Definitely on offense, but I would argue for the entire team. What say you? Do you agree? Am I overly confident with the offensive line? Am I overly concerned with the offensive line? How do you feel about that group going into training camp? All right, one segment to go here on a Thursday show. We've got the latest in recruiting. Shut it down. One of the Horns' top commits in the class of 2026 has closed down his recruitment. Who is it, and what does it mean for the Horns? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Longhorns. All right, final segment on a Thursday show. Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. Some more good news on the recruiting front for Texas in the class of 2026. Five-star edge rusher Richard Wesley, who committed to the Horns back on June 22nd, has officially shut down his recruitment, saying, quote, "Recruitment is done. I know where I'm going. Go Longhorns," and quote. Awesome. I'll be honest, I thought this was one that Texas was going to have to recruit through the whistle. Why? Well, because Richard Wesley had committed and decommitted from Oregon before his Texas pledge. Anytime someone decommits once, I'm always worried that it could happen again, especially considering the commitment happened in the summertime and we're still months away from National Signing Day. It's kind of like if your girl cheats on you once, she might swear that she's never going to do it again, but in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, every time she goes out, every time it's a girls' night, what's actually going on? You don't have to worry about that anymore with Richard Wesley. The ring is on the finger. The T-ring, if you will, is on the finger for Richard Wesley, and he will be a part of the Horns class of 26. And that's great news because this dude is a monster. One of the biggest recruiting wins for Sark, PK, and company in this class, and one of the biggest recruiting wins that those guys have had, honestly, since they've been in Austin. Richard Wesley, the 13th ranked player overall, the number 2 edge, and the number 2 ranked player in the state of California. A true 5-star, 6'5", 250 pounds. He actually reclassified. So he's only going to end up playing 3 years of high school football. This will be his third and final year coming up this fall. Last year as a sophomore, 16 TFLs, 9 sacks in 12 games. In his first year as a freshman, 2023, 11.5 TFLs, 9.5 sacks. So legit stats going up against legit competition in the state of California. Huge get for Texas. And there's a reason we spent so much time talking about the Richard Wesley commitment when it happened. It's worth bringing up again. And exciting news that he has decided to shut down his recruitment. Some extra quotes from Richard Wesley. He recently told Rivals kind of why he decided to choose Texas and why he is staying locked in to Texas. Quote, "I felt the decision was the best of both worlds. I get to play in the SEC, but I also get to walk out with a good degree. God forbid, football is not forever. So if I do get hurt in the long run, I'll still walk out with something good." End quote. He also said, "My goal is to win the Natty. I'm hoping to win a state championship in my high school season, and I want to win one in my college career as well. So it's great knowing that my team is going to be very elite when I get there, and I'm going to continue the legacy." End quote. Good head on his shoulders. Talking about getting a degree. Things don't work out in football. Look, at some point, your football career is going to end. Even if Richard Wesley has a great college career and a great professional career, at some point, he's going to have to stop playing football. Everybody does. Having a degree from the University of Texas in your back pocket, never a bad thing. And then, he wants to win. Good idea to come to a place like Texas. Longhorns, the only team in America to make it to back-to-back CFP semifinals. I think the Horns are going to be the preseason number 1 team in America when the AP poll comes out here in a few weeks. If they're not number 1, they're number 2, but they're obviously a legit contender to win it all this year. And I honestly don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So good stuff there from Richard Wesley. And this defensive line class is stacked. James Johnson, Bodney Cleveland, Corey Wells, Dylan Berryman, and Richard Wesley. It's the best D-line/edge group in America in this cycle. Hopefully that remains the case. Hell, hopefully Texas is able to add more to it before signing day gets here on December 3rd. That would be nice. We won't complain about that. But where things stand right now, it's clear. We talked about it in segment 1. Bill Connolly wondering about Texas in the trenches. Steve Sarkisian knows what I say. You can't win if you can't win in the trenches. So the Longhorns making it a big point of emphasis year in and year out to add to the offensive and defensive lines. And bringing in 5 D linemen from the portal is cool. And most of those guys have multiple years of eligibility remaining. So that's not just a Band-Aid short-term fix. But those guys, guys in the portal cost a little bit more money, especially at a premium position like defensive line. You don't want to have to rely on the portal every single year to bring in that many D linemen. If you can bring in one, if you need 1 or 2 in a bind, boom, go get them. But recruiting, high school recruiting is the lifeblood of this program. It's the lifeblood of any program. You want to make sure that you're stacking high schoolers every single year. And yeah, we're at 5 already, and we're not even to the month of August yet. So great job by Sark and PK, but got to give some more love to Kenny Baker and Alan Clark. Baker, we saw what he did in the class of 2025, bringing in those 3 blue chip defensive linemen. And then Alan Clark has only been here for a few months, came over from Ohio State after the Buckeyes national championship. He's doing a great job. He's been the lead recruiter on a bunch of these guys. And a lot of the Texas commits have talked about Alan Clark being one of, if not the biggest reason why they decided to pledge to Texas. We'll obviously see what the edge play looks like. I think Alan Clark's going to benefit from getting to work with Colin Simmons and Trey Moore and Ethan Burke and Colton Vosick. Obviously, we'll see what he does from a development standpoint. I think that's going to be really good because this is a guy who works with some of the best pass rushers in the NFL as a trainer on the side. At least he did. I don't know if he's still doing that. I assume he probably is. But, I'm not worried about the development. But the recruiting, I think that's a big part of why Sark went out and hired a young guy, Alan Clark. Not the longest resume in terms of, college coaching stops. Texas, a big job for him. And, he's done yeoman's work on the trail so far. So there you go. Richard Wesley, the 5-star edge, shuts down his recruitment. And that will shut down today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. If you made it this far, number 1, thank you. Number 2, please remember to like, share, subscribe, turn notifications on, and please leave a comment. Always do appreciate y'all doing that and love interacting with you. It's one of the fastest ways to help this thing grow right here on Locked On Longhorns. For your next listen, be sure to check out Locked On Bets with my man Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers. They are your one-stop shop for all of your sports betting needs, game picks, expert analysis, the lock of the day, every single day. They've got you covered. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. More recruiting conversation, more Texas football fall camp preview. And who knows? Never a dull moment on the 40 acres. There's going to be something to get into, and we got you covered all year round right here on Locked On Longhorns. But that'll do it for today's show. Until next time, horns up, mics off. We'll see y'all soon. This is Locked On Longhorns.